Let's get smashing! Woo! Hi, and welcome to Smashing Patriarchy. I'm Michi Main, your hostess, your main girl. Today's episode
is about economic damage.
So let's get smashing. So before we start smashing patriarchy, let's understand it. What is patriarchy? According to Wikipedia, patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and economic control. Today we're going to discuss economic abuse, or you can call it financial abuse, that is allowed to exist in a patriarchal society. So why is economic abuse so important to understanding patriarchy? One of the characteristics of patriarchy that has been established by sociologist Sylvia Walby, who has studied patriarchal cultures throughout time and all over the globe. One of the characteristics that she's discovered is predominant throughout patriarchal cultures is violence towards women. And in this country, we do have an epidemic of violence towards women. In fact, intimate partner violence, to be specific, affects at least 12 million Americans every year. And 92% of women report that domestic violence is the #1 concern of theirs. Now, an attribute of domestic violence is economic abuse. What is economic abuse? According to Wikipedia, economic abuse is a form of abuse which one intimate partner has control over the other partner's access to economic resources, which diminishes the victim's capacity to support him or herself and forces him or her to depend upon the perpetrator financially. Between 94 and 99% of all survivors of domestic violence have reported experiencing economic abuse during their relationship. Check this. A survey by the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Violence found that of respondents who were victims or survivors, 64% of them reported that their abuse impacted their ability to work. You know how hard it is to focus on a deadline when you're all stressed out and worried that your children are at risk, or that he's going to show up any moment, or that he's texting you, calling you dirty names the whole time you're trying to work? That's economic abuse. Check this. Between 21 and 60% of survivors of intimate partner violence report losing their jobs due to reasons stemming from the abuse. If he's calling you up and harassing you at work all the time, your boss is not going to like that. If you're missing deadlines, your editor is not going to like that. 40% of survivors of domestic violence reported that their abuser harassed them at work via phone and in person. Or if he knows you're at home working and he's harassing you, okay, maybe your boss won't get mad, but, try doing a good job at your work. One study found that up to 50% of victims or survivors of sexual assault either lost their jobs or left their jobs after being assaulted. The trauma from domestic violence affects us economically very much so. Here's some more economic abuse statistics. Between 2005 and 2006, 130,000 victims or survivors of stalking were asked to leave their jobs as a result of their victimization. You know, your coworkers and your bosses don't want some creepy guy standing around or coming to the store or wherever it is that you work or your office. They find that very intimidating, and they will fire you and get rid of you in order to protect themselves. So, is this fair? Not really. Is it reality? Oh, yeah.
Victims of financial abuse aren't just losing their jobs, they're losing their houses, their cars, and their kids. Department of Justice research has found that battered moms are losing custody of their kids to their abusers in 2/3 of all contested custody cases. According to the Leadership Council on Child Abuse, nearly 59,000 children a year are put into the hands of the family abuser instead of the protective parent. The National Council Against Domestic Violence reports that victims of such violence lose a total of 8 million days of paid work each year. That's the equivalent of 32,000 jobs. According to domesticviolencestatistics.org, these productivity losses account for nearly $1.8 billion annually. Additionally, $4.1 billion is spent on direct medical services to cover victims who end up in the emergency room. Even more billions are spent on long-term health care, including therapy. Add to that the billions spent on Medicaid, food stamps, school lunches, women's shelters, and other social programs that support victims of domestic violence and their families, in addition to the billions spent on law enforcement and court costs. Barry Goldstein and other experts estimate that if we end domestic violence, the U.S. could save $500 billion annually in our economy. Fiscal conservatives who view single moms as a financial liability in the country's economy could consider domestic violence as the true liability and address and dismantle the institutions that uphold it and allow it to flourish to such an extent. You know, identifying these fiscal liabilities and dismantling their structures to end the economic abuse and domestic violence is how we smash patriarchy. Here's what you should do if you are in a financially abusive relationship. Avoid using debit or credit cards that can enable your abuser to track your whereabouts. Keep your personal and financial records in a safe location. Leave copies with a trusted friend, relative, or in a bank safe deposit box to which your abuser does not have access. Compile an emergency evacuation box with copies of your family's important records and documents. Keep copies of car keys and house keys, extra money, and emergency phone numbers in a safe place. All of this you can have in a ready-to-go backpack. If you use the internet to explore domestic violence issues or research how to regain financial independence, make sure to erase your search history and your browser history so that your abuser cannot trace your activities. Take a financial inventory listing all of your assets and your liabilities. Get the numbers to your bank accounts, your CDs, the property that you own. If your partner controls the money, look for ways to find out more information about his or her income, financial property, real property, and debts. If you are considering leaving the relationship, calculate what it would cost for you to live on your own and consider starting to set aside your own money in a safe place, even if it is just for a few dollars. Obtain a copy of your credit report from any of the 3 major credit bureaus. Review the information and report any fraud, disputed claims, or identity theft that may be done by your abuser.
Ways to combat systematic economic abuse throughout our society includes things like providing court-appointed civil attorneys like we do criminal attorneys, criminalizing coercive control. You know, it's still legal to keep your partner as a slave in this country. And insurance gender rating, medical care, providing medical care for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, paid time off for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Perpetrators should be made to pay restitution to assault victims. This needs to be just more enforced. provide free transcriptions of court hearings, just make things more economically feasible for women and victims of domestic violence in court. You know, it cost me like $500 to get a transcript of the court, of our court hearing when, you know, I'm sure it was just digital. I didn't need a transcription. Just give me the digital file. It does not cost $500. Okay, ending class discrimination in family courts. Another way to combat economic abuse is to better fund women's shelters and survivors of domestic violence, to better fund nonprofit organizations for survivors, make victim services, including financial help, more easily available through state and federal and local government programs. Thank you for joining me in Smashing Patriarchy. I hope you learned a little bit about economic abuse. Please look up more information about economic abuse on domesticshelters.org, the National Council Against Domestic Violence. There's all kinds of websites you can go to for more information, or seek out stories from your friends. Share your stories, call your congressperson, and continue smashing patriarchy. Thank you.